Hello everyone, welcome to this third episode on Anubhav Learning series sessions in which we are talking about chart controls. In our last two sessions, we have discussed about the concept of analytics and also prepared the OData service which will supply data to our chart controls. If you are watching this video directly, I would recommend you to go and check part 1 and part 2 of this video series. I will put the link into the description of this video for part 1 and part 2. Before we start today's session, I would like to quickly request all of you to please subscribe onto this YouTube channel for Anubhav Oberoi, where you will find latest up-to-date information on greatest technologies and all the technical learning which you would need today to be able to perform well in your job. We are bringing these videos free of cost to all of you, can achieve your goals and meet your targets. With that, let's get started. In today's session, we will see how to build the chart control on the UI front and then display the chart data to the end user. Just to give you a quick glimpse of what outcome we are ultimately expecting, I've already created here the complete solution just to show you what will be the ultimate outcome which we will be looking into the system. If I just execute this Fiori application, which I had already created. So this series of videos are divided into 4 videos, plus one bonus video I will also be sharing with you. So in this, we will be expecting the chart outcome like this. There you go. You can see there are 4 charts here. The first chart is your sales by company, second one is sales by product, third one is sales by country, and the last one is sales by currency code. Awesome. You also will have a feature of expanding the screen, making it full screen mode to see the complete data on the UI. That's how you can expand it. You can collapse it. You can zoom in the charts. You can zoom out. You can show hide display legends. So all these features we wanted to enable and demonstrate to you. Yeah. So with that, let's get started. We will start with building our application from scratch in SAP WebIDE. Those who are very new to SAP WebIDE, I would strongly recommend you to subscribe my SAP UI5 and Fiori training, which is designed for absolute beginner on our website onlinefiorytrainings.com. We at onlinefiorytrainings.com make sure that you are successful and able to achieve every kind of Fiori application which you would like to build, a freestyle Fiori application or a element-based Fiori application in your company, together with all the latest technologies including S4HANA, ABAP on HANA Paradigm, CDS Views, EMDP, Launchpad, Fiori Security, SAP Cloud Platform, and lot more technical courses. So let's go ahead and create our first Fiori application. So I would right now go back and just close this one. So we'll start with creating our Fiori app. So I will right click and say new, create a project from template. And now here we choose SAP UI5 application. We give the name of this application as OFT chart. I will share the link of this application into the description of this video. You also can download and try it out in your system directly. Let's give the namespace oft.com and I'll say next. And we will create just a simple XML view and we'll start with the app view. Let's click on finish. And you can see the app is created with the default folder structure with an app view. We can just go back and give an ID to the app control over here. ID app. And I would now remove this content from here. Let's create another view called main view and bring that main view as part of the app view using the routing concept. So I'm going to right click, say new, and I will add another view. And we will just go ahead and add a view called main. And click on next, finish. So now we've got a main view. Go inside, just keep the page object. And now just add a simple content right now with a text. The page is under construction. Superb. So we just added an app view and a main view. And why we did that is we want to now implement the routing feature. So before we implement routing feature, we would just quickly test if this app is working fine. It's just loading the app view right now. And I would recommend to just go ahead and run this in a different session. So makes it easy for me to switch the context. So we'll come back and let's check it out. You can see an empty view is created. Now it's time to add, go ahead and add OData service linkage first of all. So we created already the OData service in our previous session. The name of the OData service is ZOFT Analytics SRV. So I will choose my data source and I will choose this OData service. So come back, right click here and maybe just go to the manifest.json, descriptor editor, go to data source, and we will add a data source over here. And now we will choose our destination for my S4HANA system. And it will now fetch all the details of the services. I choose the relevant service which we modeled in session 1, and we just click on finish to add that service. Superb. Now we will just go ahead and add a default model for this OData service. Set it as a default model, say okay. Nice. So now we have got a model, we have got a OData service linkage as well. Now let's quickly go back and check the outcome, and you would see right now we just have only the app view got loaded in the system. Yeah, it's just the app view which which is currently getting loaded. So we got to load now the main view inside this app view. So for that we will implement the routing. So we'll go back to the routing, and now here we will quickly check the code editing, and you would observe that we would have a root view already added here. If not, then maybe yeah, we have already the root view configuration done, which identifies which is going to be my view. And now we will add the routing, so that system would load my view, main view, as part of this root view. So for routing, we will add the routing configuration usually. So we will say routing, or maybe it's easy to first get started adding the routing configuration with the descriptor editor, and later point of time we will just add the stuff in the system. So we'll start with the namespace oft.com .view. That's the path of all my views. Control ID is ID up, and now I will add our first root, and the name of the root is going to be default. Give a pattern as blank. Yeah, and now we will add here the mapping target. Target name is default. Say okay, and let's add the view name as main view. Title is, let's say, chart demo, and the view ID is main. View level is 1. View type parent clear aggregation. Yeah, control ID is ID app. Target aggregation is pages, so that we can load it, and all looks good. I save this, come back to code editor, and you would observe that we will have now the routing configuration added as part of my manifest.json. It's available. Yeah, so just to check, there is a root, there is a name of the root which is default, the pattern is blank, title target, it's okay, but I also have to now say I want to have a target to be loaded, and this target is nothing but default. This is how you link the target with the target property in the root. And now we have a target here, and the default target is going to be loading the XML view with the slide transition. Clear the aggregation. View name is main. Title is okay. View ID is, let's give ID main. View level is 1. Control aggregation is pages. Control ID is also given here as ID app. Though control ID is already given, I just remove it, and now I save this. So if you want to know more about routing concept, please subscribe my SAP UI5 and Fiori training, because in this video, our focus is to build the chart control. We are not focusing here to add routing configuration or router What is router, how to instantiate router, how to initialize router, how to work with router, what is router, what is route match handler, what is the route pattern, how the navigation concept realizes in SAP UI5. All these in detail are covered in my UI5 and Fiori training, which is it's pretty easy to understand these concepts. Now, these are the core concepts, and you have to really work on your core first to jump into this tutorial. Because if your core is not strong, you will just be roaming around here and there to understand these things. But in the proper development, if you attend our trainings, you will understand the proper development with the gold standards without any copy paste of code. So most of the trainers who are teaching you online, they are teaching you copy paste of code. We make sure that we don't do any copy paste of code, rather write every single line of code in front of you. With this way, you will be able to get the depth of the subject and understand what is going on in each line. Okay, so right now, consideration is to focus on the chart. So I'm not focusing on the routing concept in detail. But in my detailed training on UI5, this is something which is covered much more in advanced level. Okay, let's go back, and now it's time to test our application. So let's go ahead and test our app. So let's come back to the page and refresh here. And still we don't see the main view is getting loaded. It's not loading. So what could be the reason? And as I guess correctly, it is hidden in the component.js. As you can see, we have not even initialized the router. So until you initialize the router object, system is not going to read this routing configuration. No matter what routing configuration we add, it is not going to come in action. So let's go ahead and create an object of the router in the init method. So this dot get router, which calls the base class to get the router object, and I say initialize. Cool. Let's save this, come back to the view and refresh. Voila, there you go. You can see it has loaded the main view with its title. And also you remember the text which we entered, page is under construction. So as part of the next step, we will quickly change this title and also bring our first chart. So basically chart, how do you bring a chart? Basically, we have talked about it in our last session. We saw that we have to basically get a Viz frame here. So Viz frame is the frame in which the chart will be brought in, and it will be drawn with the help of the flattened data set. Together with that, we have seen also that we have to pass the feeds, and feed is specific to a chart. So suppose if you're using a bar chart, then you have to pass the feeds accordingly. Or if you're using the pie or a donut chart, then the feeds are going to be different. So that is what we will be exploring. So first of all, let's change the title here for my main view. And for that, we go back to the main view, and now all our routing and everything, the base is ready now, and we can start coding in for our chart. So let's say this is a demo on chart with www.onlinefioretrainings.com, and we will go ahead and write the stuff inside. So I will remove that empty text, and after that we will start adding the chart. So first of all, how do you bring in the chart here? To bring the chart, we will utilize a library offered by SAP, which is the chart library. So once again, I will just go to the SAP UI5 SDK and show you more about the library which we will use. It's the visualization library called Viz Frame library. So out of the visualization, we have a frame. So Viz Frame, yeah. So we will just go ahead and search for chart control, and you would find here the chart, yeah. And I'm more interested in the Viz Frame, so let's search for Viz Frame. There you go. So it's part of SAP Viz UI5 controls library, yeah. And there you can see that this is how Viz Frame looks like. So it has a couple of properties, and importantly, we need to look at the aggregation. So in the aggregation, if you see, we have data sets, and this data set is responsible for displaying the data. So all your flattened data set should be part of this data set aggregation. And of course, if we want to then display the data, then we have to also add the feeds for the special type of charts. Now, with that, let's go ahead and utilize this library. So this is the library we will be using. and we will be adding as a dependency in our view as part of step number 1. And then later point of time we will be also adding new features, basically the Viz Frame, and then we will see how can we plot the chart. So until you have the right data set, the chart cannot be plotted, which I will show you first. So we will go back and add here all the dependencies in terms of namespaces. So let me just go ahead and press enter here. I will also zoom in it a little bit so that you can see it better. Okay, yeah, so XML namespace, and we will add the first library called Viz, and this is the dependency sap.which.ui5.controls. Just now we saw that is the library we are adding as a first dependency. When you go back and see SAP which UI5 controls library, so SAP which UI5 controls library, that's the first library. And later part of time we would also need to give the feed data. So we would need a feed library, and also we would need the data library to give the flattened data set. So let's add all of them. So XML namespace, next library is going to be my Viz.data library, which is part of SAP which UI5 is very common for every case. So let's bring it on. And then it will have SAP which UI5 data library. The next comes is XML namespace, which.feeds. And now we will add the feeds library here, sap.viz.ui5.controls.common.feeds. Cool, we have added 3 dependencies here in our view. If you remember our last part 2 video of this series, we had talked about it, that what are all the bare minimum we would need to create a project. So we started with the project with our OData service plugged in, and now we have to prepare, of course, the data set and do the binding. But we have created the chart in the view now, and then we will also call the data to pull the data from the database, which is through the OData service, and then bind that to our chart control. So let's go back and add the chart now. Based on this library, we will add a chart. So I'll say Viz, and we will just add a Viz frame. Yeah, that's our Viz frame control, which is going to give a frame, and I will give an ID here, ID Viz frame 1, and then I'll say UI config. This is going to be used for Fiori based charting, so I will say application set, and then I can choose Fiori. Now you may be wondering, how do I know what is the property and what is the value I should pass? So for that, I go back to the UI5 SDK, and we just quickly go scroll up. And as per the control hierarchy, we jump into the control sample. And then you just go inside any chart, maybe this one. And you can just quickly flip the view to see all the code, what they have. And accordingly, you can decide what is the property they are passing in the sample, and we can also accordingly pass these properties in our sample. So if you just come down, there is a Viz frame, and you can see this UI config property is passed as application set Fiori. They are also passing the width and height as well as the type of the chart, which we can also do it. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will be creating 4 different variety of charts: the column chart, the bar chart, donut chart, and the pie chart. So first we'll start with the bar chart. So let me just go back, and I will just add the width and height property first of all. And then we will add the chart type, basically which type, and we will first add a bar chart. Cool. And now let's give the width values. Of course, never copy paste the code until you understand every single line, so that you will never get problems in your productive code. And even you get it, you will be able to fix it. So now I just save and just quickly show the result with that. Refresh, and you would see there's nothing right now on the UI. Of course, by its nature, since we did not have any data right now, it doesn't display anything. Press F12 to look at the DOM, and you can also explore a little bit this area. You can see an empty Viz control has been created. Empty Viz frame has been added. You see, this Viz frame is there. But of course, since you don't have any data binding right now done, you will not get the data here. So now I will just go ahead and add the data set aggregation. How do I know data set is an aggregation? So go back again to the API reference for Viz UI5 controls, Viz frame, and you can go here and check aggregation. There is an aggregation called data set, and it is only 0 or 1, and the object type is SAP Viz UI5 data, which has then the subclass as flattened data set, which we will be importing or passing into this as an object. We will jump into the flattened data set class and look at what else it has inside. So if you just go to aggregation, you would find that it has dimension aggregation and a measures aggregation, which we discussed in the last session. What does this means? So let us go ahead and create this data set aggregation in the view. So I will come here and I will say again, my Viz naming convention, and then namespace Viz with the data set aggregation, and inside this data set aggregation we use viz.data, and then we will add here again the name of flattened data set, aggregation, and of course we right now have no data source, so just I add it empty. Now this flattened data set further has dimensions and measures, so I will add viz.data dimensions. Make sure that you don't do any spelling mistakes here, so you can keep cross-checking now with the SDK documentation, dimensions and measures. So we've added dimensions and measures both. Now, if you look at the dimensions aggregation, let's go back to SDK. Our dimensions aggregation can have multiple dimensions. Each dimension is of type dimension definition object, which is again part of SAP Viz UI5 data class, data library, and then we have dimension definition. So let's add a dimension definition, which has then what properties. I go inside, look at the properties, and it has a name and a value property. Okay, so that's what our dimension definition is all about. So I will be using dimension definition inside the dimension. So let's use that. Again, viz.data, dimension definition with name and value. Of course, we will be filling it later point of time. Right now, we don't have a data here, so I'm just keeping it as it is. Now, next is the measures. So let's add the measure. So viz.data, and measure has what aggregation? So let's go back and check. For flattened data set aggregations, we have a measures aggregation, and it expect measure definition object inside. Let's go ahead and add that. And this also has name and value property. Cool. After that, we will also, as I mentioned, we have to add the feeds aggregation. You can go back to the chart control level, Viz frame level, and you will find that there is an aggregation called feeds. And it can take multiple objects of each object of type feed item. So let us go ahead and add feed item. Now, this is the property, this is the aggregation which actually depends on the chart type you're using. I will show you that change in a minute when we will create different variety of charts here. So I'll say feeds aggregation, Viz feeds aggregation, and then viz.feed, and then it will have feed item. Every feed item has three properties: UID, type, and values. And we will be adding like this 2 feed item, one for measure and one for our dimension. So measures are always your KPIs. They are represented on value axis. That's a hard-coded UID type. How do you know the UID type for feed item? Go back there, go to feed item class, go to properties, you see this UID. And now you can see here for category axis, value axis, yeah, these are all the possible values which you can pass for bar chart. Yeah, the UID values. So that's how you can pass the values for UID. So let's go back, value axis, and another is the category axis for the dimension. So now we'll put the type here. And of course, the type property is either it's a dimension or a measure. So first one is a measure and next one is the dimension. Now, let's go back and refresh our page. Of course, the chart won't load because right now, still the data is not supplied to our chart control, right? So let's go back to the UI still, just do a quick refresh on our UI and still you see no data is getting loaded. Obvious reasons, because we don't have any data set right now connected. So what I will do, I will now bring the data source, and to bring the data source, before we do that, let's quickly call our data source one more time and see what is the format in which we are getting this data. So for that, what I do is I will connect back to our backend system. So I just open SAP GUI and in the meantime, quickly connect to my SAP system where we modeled the OData services the other day. And I have connected to my system, and let me just go to the gateway client transaction code. And this is our OData service. So just to take an example, I want sales by customer, execute, and we will see this data is coming here. So we are getting text value pair, and we're getting multiple records in results. And this is our entity set name. Yeah. So when you query this entity set, it gives you the multiple records. Now, what is an entity set? What is an OData service? If you are still finding it difficult to understand, I would strongly recommend to take the core course, which is SAP UI5 and Fiori training course. Without that, it is going to be very challenging. Somehow you will get output, but you'll not get that confidence which ideally a good developer should have in the company. Yeah. So let us go ahead and do the binding now. So we jump to the view here, and now you can see here, this is our data set. Remember, the property names and the entity set name is quite important for binding. So now I will go back to flatten data set level, and I'll say, hey, please consider my data set. And as we doing binding, curly braces slash my entity set name where I have the data. Remember, I told you the golden rules and the best practices in the last session. What should be the right way of getting the data for your analytics? Never ever do looping and operations and manipulation on the client side. Bad idea. So that's why we are getting the full finished data. And remember, the property name is always text and value. So I'm just going to come back and give some name for my dimension. Dimension is my text. And of course, here in the value, we got to do binding with the text property. And then goes the value, name, and give the value here. Now, coming to the feed part, it's very, very important that we have these feed connected to these names in the dimension and the measure area. So here you see this measure, which is my measure connecting to the feed. So my measure is this guy. So we will be connecting here, which is my dimensions. Dimension values are represented by text. That's what we have to do. Let's go ahead and do that. So I will come to the values and we'll say value. That's the connecting factor to the measure with the value, and which is a numeric value here in this case, and the dimension getting connected with the text. Superb. All looks good, but let's go back and now experience what happens there. Yeah. So let us go back and check. I'm going to come back to our UI and I just refresh. There you go. Awesome. So we have got a nice bar chart with the data displayed for every customer and that their total sales. And look at how beautiful it looks. It clearly gives me an idea that this particular customer, probably from Spain, has the maximum sales given to my company amongst all of them. But hey, hold on. I want to probably change this value here, and the label of this, I want to change it as sales. Yeah. And look at here, this text, I want to change it as company name. Yeah. So company name and sales. At the same time, I want to also change the title of my chart. So let us go ahead and make these changes on the system. So I come here and change this name to company name. And now guys, this is a very often mistake which we do with the chart. We have changed the name here for company name. But in the feed item, now the link is broken. So this text is unable to link to any of the dimension there on the top. Yeah, it's no more linkable. So this is going to produce an error. And this is how very often you get errors in the chart, which you are not able to figure out what's going on. You can see incomplete dimension binding. This error is very often you see in the Viz Frame charts. And the solution for that is definitely this name linkage. So this company name has to exactly match this guy. And maybe I will also make it as sales. And just make sure that this also matches with the name of your measure definition. I just save that up, come back and refresh. And you would see here, wow, company name, and you got sales. So you can see also the sales is getting displayed here. Superb. What else? The chart title, guys. Let's go ahead and change the chart title as well. Now to add these properties, let's go back to UI documentation for SAP UI5, and maybe you can see here we are at Viz Frame, and I go to the properties, and now in the properties we will find something called Viz properties. So this is the property which we will use, and this always accept a JSON object as an input parameter. So let's go and use this which properties as part of my Viz Frame, and I will just go ahead and add that. This properties equals to, and this is where we have to now pass a JSON. So we have to say title, and this title will have a text, and I will say this is sales per customer. Yeah. So now just end the JSON and save this. So that is what will be the title of our chart now. You can go back and I refresh, and you just see, there you go, sales per customer, voila. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, how to build our first chart. In our next session, we will learn about how to optimize this screen to break it down into 4 pieces and to basically produce this kind of user interface. So we want to create a dashboard. That's our ultimate goal. So it is going to be this kind of a screen which we want to produce ultimately, where we will have this whole screen divided into 4 parts, as you can see, and each part will have this option for showing and hiding legends, zooming in, zooming out, maximizing the whole chart, minimizing the whole chart. And look at the beautiful dashboard here. It has 4 parts, and that's what we want to achieve as part of our next tutorial. Watch out for the next tutorial. Till then, see you and goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe on this channel and hit the bell icon so you will get notified automatically whenever I release the next tutorial. Have a nice day and goodbye.